Okay, so last time we showed you how to graph this transformation with absolute values, but we didn't show you how to describe it as far as the domain and the range. So let's go ahead and do that very quickly here. And so looking at the function, looking at how we graph the function, in this case we moved it up 1, 2, 3. And so looking at this newly created graph, how would we describe it? Well, the domain, these actually go on forever. I should actually have put little arrows at the end, right? So the domain goes on. I can put them on there. There's arrows on there. It indicates that they're going on forever, which means the domain is all these numbers. So the x value is all real numbers. All real numbers. And that would be the domain, actually, is all real numbers, the x value. The range, sorry about that. The range, well, notice that for the y value, the range is not all real numbers, but it's y would be like is greater than or equal to 3 because it starts at 3 and then it goes up from there. So the domain would be all real numbers and the range would be greater than or equal to 3. Going back to this one that we did earlier, what would the domain be? Looks like I wrote the domain second. I should have wrote it first, but we can still work with this. So what would the domain be? Well, looking at this, the x values again, it's going all the way this way and all the way this way, right? To the left and to the right. So the domain is all real numbers again. What about the range? Well, the range, sorry guys. The range would be every number greater than or equal to 0, right? So the range is y is greater than or equal to 0, because it's going up from this point. Okay, so I want you guys to go ahead and give this a try on your own, using the last video's lesson and then the description of domain and range from this lesson. It says graph the function, compare each function to the graph. F of x equals the absolute value of x. I'll go ahead and remind you how to graph the absolute value of x. It's just going up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1, because the slope in this case is a 1, right? Y equals an x plus b. The b is 0. The slope is a 1 over 1. But since it's absolute values, that you do it on both sides. So this will get you started on both of these, but then you go ahead and write the transformation, okay? All right, so the other thing we need to learn is how to graph each function when there's a number in front, either whether it be a fraction or a whole number. So graph each function, compare the graph of the function to that parent function of f of x equals the absolute value of x. This is going to keep showing up, right? Describe the domain and the range. Okay. Well, f of x equals x, we already know, is you go up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1 on both sides. But then how are we moving it, right? Well, that probably could have been over a little bit more than that. But how would we transform it? Well, it wants us to do a change with q of x equaling 2 times the absolute value of x, right? So we could choose any numbers we want, but it's smart to choose small numbers close to this. And we'll start with a negative 2. If I were to choose a negative 2 and substitute it into this absolute value bar, it would be a positive 2. And 2 times a positive 2 would be 4. If I were to put a negative 1 in, it would be a negative 1 absolute value is a positive 1. And 1 times 2 would be 2. If I put a 0 in, 2 times 0 would be 0. If I put a 1 in, 2 times 1 would be 2. And if I put a 2 in, substitute a 2 in, 2 times 2, absolute value of 2 is 2. So 2 times 2 would be 4. And so this here would represent the change. And all you'd have to do is plot those points. So these two are together, and these two are together. So if x is a negative 2, 1, 2, y would be 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. If x were a negative 1, y would be 2. If x were a 0, y would be 0. If x were a 1, y would be 2. If x were a 2, y would be 4. And there you have it. This would be the new transformed graph. So how would I describe the domain and the range? Well, the domain is still going to be all real numbers, right? It's still hidden every x value because this goes on for infinity. So all real numbers. And the range in this case is starting at what? Looks like it's still starting at 0, right? So it's y would be greater than or equal to 0. Okay, what if there's a negative fraction in front? How would we handle that? We're still going to make that same chart. Okay, so I'm going to choose the same numbers, negative 2, negative 1, 0, 1, and 2. This is just the same the same function that we had just a second ago. P of x equals negative half times the absolute value of x. And we'll just substitute numbers in. If we put a negative 2 in there, the absolute value of a negative 2 is a positive 2. And what's a negative half of positive 2? Well, it would be a negative 1. If you put a negative 1 in there, it'd become a positive 1. But what's 1 times a negative half? Well, it's just a negative half. 0 times anything is 0. Again, 1 times the negative half would be a negative half. And then 2 times the negative half would be negative 1. So again, if we had that parent function already in there, let's see if I can do this. 1, 2 is 2, 3 is 3 would be about right there. And we do the same thing on this side. 1 and 1, 2 and 2 would be right there. 3 and 3 would be right there. Okay, sorry, it's a little crooked. If this was the parent function, how would we move it? Well, we just use our chart. If x were negative 2, 1, 2, y would be a negative 1. If x were negative 1, y would be a negative half. If x were 0, y would be 0. If x were 1, y would be a negative half. If x were 2, y would be a negative 1. So what you start to see is that it's a reflection because there's a negative, and it's half of what this original parent function was. So what would the domain and the range be in this case? Well, the domain is still all real numbers. It's still going all the way on both sides for infinity. But the range is not going up, is it? The range actually would be y is less than or equal to 0. Okay, it's your turn to go ahead and give this a try. So graph each function, compare the graph to the graph of f of x equals the absolute value of x. Describe the domain and the range. The first thing that is a great way to start off is to go ahead and make your graph. And this might not be large enough for this first one, but go ahead and make your graph. And then remember that the parent function is just going to be up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1. If it's absolute values, you do the same thing on the other side. It's going to look like this. And the question is, how are you changing this? And what is very helpful to do is to make your table. And I can see that I am running out of time. So you put the x in here. What you're going to put as your input. You can choose any numbers you want, and we are out of time.